Coming up on
For a
this
few
week's
months, I couldn't
episode,
walk. I couldn't feed myself. I couldn't think straight.
A lot of people might try an herb for a few days, like almost like as if you would take a pharmaceutical. If you don't see relief right away, you're like, it doesn't work. So I
Mhm.
always ask a few questions.
As far as like tincture making to get the actual medicine in the dropper bottle. So once the herbs are done drying all the way, then
They're not really working with the body so much
Mhm.
as overriding our own processes.
And so my favorite go-to herb for that is
Friends, we have a very special guest today, Victoria Bledsoe. Victoria is a certified massage therapist that specializes in energy medicine and reflexology. She is a master herbalist and the founder and CEO of Alchemy Botanicals LLC. Victoria is currently earning her certification in naturopathy. Victoria has been in private practice for the past 28 years. She has been a speaker at the Indiana Brain Association annual conference, as well as Indiana University, Ball State, Purdue, and the Indiana Neonatal Nursing Convention. Victoria, throughout many of the years helping countless individuals utilizing her expertise, taught at Midwestern University in Phoenix. She is a mother of 3 and a grandmother of 7. In her spare time, Victoria enjoys kayaking, hiking, gardening, and reading. Victoria, welcome to the show.
Hey Tara, it's nice to be here. So overjoyed to be here.
Well,
Thank
we
you.
are thrilled to have you here, Victoria, or Vicky, as I have called you for the past 12
Yep.
years. She just happens to be my massage therapist and herbalist. I've seen numerous other professionals for my issues, mostly sports-related injuries to my neck. There is no one I trust more. And trust me, friends, she is very gifted. I don't exactly know what she is doing as she does it. I just know it works. Vicky, we have a lot to cover today, and I am itching to get into it. But before we jump in, I'm sure my listeners would love to know your story. We all have a story, the why behind where we are today. Vicky, we would all love to know your story.
Okay, so I had been thinking about this because I knew you were going to ask me this question. So when I was just a young girl, like 8, 9, 10 years old, I would go to my grandmother's farm and I would go out in the fields and collect flowers and weeds, and I would pretend I was making potions and mud pies and all of that. And I would stick flowers in the mud pies, and it turns out that it was wild chamomile. And I didn't know it back then because I was just so young. And so then over the years of my life, before I actually had a formal education, I was really interested in wild foods, herbs that grow in the wild, um, and how to incorporate those into my lifestyle. And I started out years ago just making, herb teas because I didn't know what else to do with it. So now I make tinctures, salves, soaps, and I eat a lot of raw herbs along with a variety of raw vegetables. And so I just kept going. And then I took a 12-week herb class with a gentleman, Justin Peterson, who he studied with Rosemary Gladstar. And Rosemary Gladstar is known all over this world. And she has a 500-acre herb sanctuary. And so Justin, he took on an awful lot of information from her and shared it in a class that I took. And I just thought I was going to be making this plant medicine for myself. Well, that didn't last too long because then I told people about what I was doing and they were like, can you make me some? And so I just started making different things and different tinctures. And if people would say, oh, I have this and it won't go away, what can you do for me? So I would do a little research, if I was unfamiliar, and then I would just create whatever they needed. And I still do that. I have about half a dozen jars right now of custom tinctures, I should call them, because people will say, can you blend this for me? And I do. And then when they just send me a text and say, hey, I need another bottle, then that's how I do that. But as a whole, I take to the farmer's market and have in my studio around 52 different tinctures.
Wow.
And yeah, one of the really cool ones, a lady that I had met years ago, she called me one day and said, "Do you have any hawthorn?" Well, I had never heard of that way back then. And so I did some research, and it turns out it's good for everything cardiac and cholesterol. And so now that's one of the tinctures in my product line. And then the biggest issue that people seem to have is inflammation in their body, the levels that are too high. And so my favorite go-to herb for that is marshmallow root. It's a demulcent. And so to put it simply, like if you have a congested head or your nose is stopped up, you just put a couple of droppers full in your tea or water, juice, what have you, and then you just drink it. And within like 10 to 20 minutes, you can start to notice that it starts draining.
Yes.
And it also, as far as inflammation in your whole body, it starts to get rid of all of it. Like I have 7 women that I work with. They're all triathletes. And they have these knees that just will not quit hurting. And their leg muscles really hurt. So I put them all on marshmallow root. And then they're like, "Oh, we need this." And so then I said, "You need to take some spirulina." So
I love spirulina.
I love chlorella too.
Yeah.
So I just, I kept going. If people would tell me what their issues were, I would just create tinctures for them. Mm-hmm. And then one day I made soap, and that was a big flop. I threw away more than I actually saved. And then I got the hang of it. And so I became comfortable with that. And soap making is actually a dangerous process to go through. You got to turn your phone off. You can't, you're dealing with really hot liquids.
I can imagine.
And so I started doing that. And then I made a salve for poison ivy. Because I'm highly allergic to poison ivy. And so I had it so bad one day, I had raked my yard and I didn't know it, raked it all into a pile and burned it. It was in my nose, in my lungs, in my ears.
That's awful.
My eyes, I couldn't even open my eyes really. And so after that started going away, and as soon as I could see enough to look things up, I went online and I looked up, what would be best for poison ivy. And I found jewelweed, and it just grows so prolifically everywhere. And so I go out and wild harvest that.
Wow.
And so I do have a tincture for internal stuff, like I had it in my lungs, and I did not have that tincture back then.
Okay.
So I've learned all about that. And then I would go out, I would hang it up, and I would dry it. And then I would have to simmer it in organic oils. And I do like a triple extraction process for my salves. I just keep going in there and leaching more nutrients out of that particular plant. So then I get local beeswax from a beekeeper, and I put enough in there. Like, I don't have exact measurements for what I do. I have an idea. But if you use a thicker oil, then you don't need as much as the beeswax. So I have to test every batch. And so then the next time I got poison ivy, I just had it on my legs, and I put that on there. And relief comes really, really quickly.
When you're mixing it, you said not an exact recipe, you just know.
I just know. And so there's 2 kinds of jewel weed. There's a common one, and the flower on it is yellow. That one is non-medicinal. So the really pretty orange flowers are the plants that you use. And so I have like a couple of places that I go to get that's out in these fields by a creek. And I look like a space alien all dressed up when I go out to get some of this, because it's the antidote for poison ivy. It most often grows in the general vicinity of poison ivy.
Interesting.
So then I take it home and I hang it up and I dry it. I prefer to use dried herbs rather than wilted ones or fresh. I get a little concerned about bacteria and mold.
Yes.
So I go out and I get as much jewel weed before it fades away. It will mostly start disappearing in September. And so basically from June-ish to September, I harvest it, I wildcraft it. And I keep enough to use for the whole year. And so right now, this time of year in the spring, when it's not available, I have lots and lots of dried jewel weed. So I'm getting ready to make 4 cases of jewel weed salve. And so I'm still working on my website to put my store on there. And so people will be able to buy it from there. But I do it the farmer's market, as you know, and local people can come there and just grab some. And I last summer, it must have been July or August, I was at the market and this lady came and she had poison ivy on her legs. And it was to the point where she was ready to claw her eyes out.
Oh my
And
goodness.
she said, I seen on that Facebook post that you have jewel weed for poison ivy. She goes, where is it? I said, here. And I opened it and I said, here. So right there, she put it on her legs. So what it does, it relieves the pain and itch of poison ivy. It does not dry it up. It does not make it crusty. And so once that pain and itch go away, it starts to heal. And so then it heals much quicker when you use jewel weed. And it does relieve pain. And the pain factor that's in that plant, I was over at my daughter's and her husband's aunt fell in the gravel driveway and hurt her hip and it wouldn't stop. So she just grabbed that and put it on there. And within an hour, she said that took that pain away. So it does have some really excellent pain relieving properties.
I love that. I love your story and just imagining you out in the fields, suited up with whatever you're wearing. I have a very vivid imagination, and I might put something on the screen right here, what I'm imagining you look like out there.
Oh, geez.
I've got a list of questions I'm sure my listeners are itching to know about. Let's start perhaps with the most important question. What is plant medicine?
Okay, so plant medicine is just a form of medicine that dates back to, like 1,000 years ago. And it's the first medicine that we ever had. It's been used in every country in the world. Native American Indians they're very, very knowledgeable when it comes to plants. And that's one of the things that interested me as well. How do these people learn about this a long, long time ago? We didn't have a computer age. We didn't have all these books. And so I kind of dilly-dally a little bit here and a little bit there, looking up information that, when it interests me, I'll just do a little research. So plant medicine is the use of wild or grown plants that you, like I said earlier, I prefer to use the dried plant. And so I hang them up all over my house to dry. And then as far as like tincture making, to get the actual medicine in the dropper bottle.
I had to interrupt this video and let you know about a free ebook I just created, the Ultimate Gluten-Free Guide. You definitely want to snag a copy for yourself. The link is in the show notes. I will also leave it as the first pinned comment. Enjoy.
So once the herbs are done drying all the way, then I take them off the stem if that need be. Different plants, you can use the aerial parts. Other ones, you just use the roots or barks. Like white willow bark that aspirin is made out of is literally from a willow tree.
I want to underscore what Vicki just said there about white willow bark and aspirin, because I think a lot of people don't realize that most pharmaceuticals are inspired by, come from plants, right? And we've been using plants for thousands of years, and they've made tremendous differences in people's lives. Yet I know a lot of people might be more hesitant when it comes to herbs. more fearful of, I don't know exactly what that is versus a pharmaceutical, but there is a lot of evidence-based information as well as anecdotal information for centuries, right? Having to
Right.
do with herbs. I'd love to hear maybe even your take on that, like, or interesting things you've heard along your journey with maybe a little resistance, or maybe it's the opposite and more people are willing and prefer to go an herbal route.
Okay. I do have an opinion on that. Everybody's not going to agree.
I love opinions.
So in my life, in my experience, I have come to pretty much eliminate pharmaceuticals. It's taken me a long time for many reasons. I don't like the side effects. I don't like the harshness. I think something made in a laboratory is very harsh on our tissues and cells. And so I've come to rely on herbs, and on my kitchen counter there, I must have like 23 different things I take every day. So when you are switching over, one thing to really remember is that when you start to use herbs, they might take 2 to 3 months before you start seeing any evidence of, yeah. And so also a little bottle of herbs that you might buy from someone like me, depending on what it is between like $15 and $40. And it will, if you take it every day in a 2-ounce bottle, that should last you almost a month. Compared to some pharmaceuticals that are really expensive.
Hundreds of dollars with lots of side effects.
Right. And so I prefer the use of herbs, and the more and more I become familiar with them, even after all these years, I'm a person that will learn something new every single day of my life. And so
Same.
I prefer the herbs over pharmaceuticals for those reasons I mentioned. Also, they can, depending on the herb and what you're using it for, it can act very quickly. Like I mentioned, the marshmallow root, that within 10 or 15 minutes, I can feel it just drain in my head, and my nose doesn't sound like it's stopped up. And one of the herbs I think we're going to talk about is yarrow. They used to use yarrow in the Civil War. And so if a soldier had a wound or whatever, they would pick yarrow and chew it, and then put the yarrow and saliva on the wound, and it closes it right up. So those are 2 examples of something that can work quickly, and then things that can work long term. Like hawthorn for your heart and cholesterol stuff. That's going to take a little bit. And you always, once you start taking it, it's almost like a prescription, 3 times a day. So it's always in your system and always doing what it does for us.
Yeah.
So
I want to highlight something that you said earlier, because I think it really warrants being restated. That, well, 2 things actually. That the first, it can take longer, right? Not with everything, but with some herbs, it can take longer. And a lot of people might try an herb for a few days, like almost like if you would take a pharmaceutical, if you don't see relief right away, you're like, it doesn't work. So I always ask a few questions with any of my clients or patients. I ask first, what was the brand or who made it, right? Because that, I'm speaking to an herbalist here, but that definitely, it matters where it comes from, and
it does.
Other components that are in it. So definitely, where are you getting it from, and how long have you been taking it, and how have you been taking it? Because sometimes somebody might not be taking it appropriately. Like you said with hawthorn, maybe they're taking it every other day or just once a day instead of several times a day to keep a steady in the body. So I think that's really important to highlight, right? And one of the things I usually will bring up is that a pharmaceutical, they have very strong binding affinity. That's why pharmaceutical companies create them the way that they do. They bind and they don't let go, right? And that's one of the reasons why they can work quick And
Mhm.
one of the reasons why they can have devastating side effects, because
Right.
they're not really working with the body so much
Mhm.
as overriding our own processes, right? Like you said, for
Right.
high blood pressure. Well, if somebody has high blood pressure in my business with functional medicine, I would like to know why they have high blood pressure,
Right.
right? Instead of just masking it, right? It like if we give something to help with the blood pressure and it lowers the blood pressure, but there's actually a perfusion problem in the body, like the blood is not pumping effectively to the limbs, let's say.
Mhm.
If the blood pressure isn't high, we're going to have downstream effects. So I am a fan. I like I think you said 20 different things on your counter. Somewhere around that for me, a little more, a little less for the
Yeah.
things that I take. And definitely, again, underscore it's so important where it comes from. And I guess this is the perfect segue into another question that I have, which is
Okay.
how exactly is plant medicine made? Right? You're in the field, garbed up. We all have a visual of you, right? And you're garbed up, and you said that you have stuff drying all over your house. What then?
Okay. So once the herbs are dry, um, let's just say let's start with something with leaves instead of a root. Or so just say back to the jewel weed. So I go out and I wildcraft that. And then I bring it home and I have all these drying racks. Hang them up. A few days later, they're completely dry. So in order to make a tincture to take internally with the little dropper bottle, I put I use half-gallon canning jars. And so I will put about a third of that jar, sometimes half of the jar, sometimes a whole jar. And then I fill it halfway with alcohol, like vodka. You can make them with bourbon or any alcohol. I prefer not to use grain alcohol. I think that's too harsh on tissues inside of us. Um, so I just use vodka, and then on top of that, I personally add some distilled water. And because my theory is if you have to take something long term, you don't want all that alcohol, even though it's a little bit. And so I add the distilled water, the alcohol on top of the herb. Then I make a label. You have to label every single thing you do, and batch number, all the ingredients and at what ratios, like, you know, 50, 50 water to 50 alcohol. I always put, even on my labels, that the jars are macerating, all of the information. Um, and so then every single day for a minimum of 2 to 3 weeks, you have to shake the jar. It's called succussing. And you shake it up and then you let it settle overnight. And I have over 150 jars that I shake every day. And so then once that's done, I have a start date and a ready date. And so the night before the ready date, I put all of those out on my counter. And then I have baking trays, and I take a piece of tape, put it on there, and I put what that is that I'm working on. So I have to strain it, and I strain my things 3 to 4 times, my tinctures. And so it gets all of the sediment, all the leaves, and if there happens to be any dirt or anything like that in there, I just strain it out. And I use unbleached coffee filters to strain mine. There's bleach in the white coffee filters. I can now, because I'm very sensitive, I can tell the difference if somebody strained it in the bleach ones. So then once it's strained, I let it sit maybe overnight again, depending on what it is. And then I strain it one more time because it does get sediment in the bottom. So I try to eliminate, like 100% of that sediment, so it's not in those little bottles. So after that, then I fill 2-ounce bottles, the dropper bottles, and they're brown. They're called amber bottles. And so once they're in there, I then put the dropper in, screw it on, and then I put a seal on there. So somebody just can't walk by and open it up. And then I stick the label on there, and there you go. It's a pretty simple process, but at the same time, that alcohol is suspending those constituents out of that herb into the mixture. And that's how that works. And also, one thing I wanted to mention real quick is years ago, I had a woman who bought something from me 10 or 12 years ago, and it caused her to have a rash on her skin. So she called me and she was really upset because she had this rash. I said, it's detoxing you. That's what it's. I said, the alcohol will spill over into your liver. And I says, and cause that reaction. That's what a detox could do sometimes. And so then once I explained it to her, then she was okay. But I did not learn that in that herb class. I had to experience that myself. And I got a really bad rash one time on my stomach. And I thought, why do I have that? Well, it was because of what I was taking. And when you're taking tinctures, they're much more powerful than one would think. I mean, they are no different in that regards to a pharmaceutical that they just get in there and do what they do. So it depends on what you're taking. It depends on how often you're taking it. So those are different variables, and it's different for different people.
That's so interesting, right? And you used maybe a new word for some, or maybe it's a taboo word for others. I do feel like the word can be somewhat controversial, but likely due to either misinformation or ignorance, right? You use the word tincture, right? So somebody thinks of herbs, maybe they're thinking about eating the herbs, right? Like oregano, like those are herbs. Everybody's cooking spices, which are herbs, right? And then there's different vessels in which to get it in, right? Where I'd love, because I feel like if more people really understood what exactly a tincture is, and again, circling back to it matters where it's coming from, even if it's just for the filtering method, right? I definitely don't want any bleached anything. And so you said you can feel the difference. I feel like I would be able to feel the difference also.
And so you can taste it. You can really taste it too.
So I know we touched on it briefly, but can you speak a little more into tinctures and why that might be more beneficial for somebody, let's say, than taking a tablet of a supplement that comes from an herb, let's say?
Sure. So supplements generally have some sort of fillers or binders in. And in that regard, it's no different than a pharmaceutical. There's stuff in there, you're not getting what you pay for, basically. You're not getting that true product. So, ask me the question again. I'm getting too far ahead of myself.
Well, and I feel you right now, right? Because I'm very passionate about anything having to do with the body and us getting optimized and feeling and living our best, right? But I feel like tinctures can be really misunderstood. Like almost somebody could be fearful of, oh, I don't know if I want to use that in a dropper. I'll just take a tablet or a capsule of something. But you spoke about the potency that we can get and maybe using less, like not needing as much as we would in a capsule form. And I wonder about the absorbency of a tincture, let's say, versus a tablet that the body has to break down.
Okay, if you take a tincture, because of the alcohol that's in there, and by the way, tinctures can be made like with apple cider vinegar or glycerin, but the shelf life for glycerin produced tinctures, the shelf life was only about 6 months. The shelf life for herbal extracts, which is also known as tinctures and extracts, are pretty much the same thing. Those really don't have a shelf life. But as an herbalist, I like to put a date on there. I usually put 5 or 6 years out for the date for the year. So if you use a tincture, it works 70% faster than a capsule or a tablet.
Okay.
If you drink teas, they work really well, but you got to drink an awful lot of those teas. And if say you're a person who, when spring is coming on and allergies flare up, if you like to have echinacea to keep your immune system boosted, if you drink echinacea tea pretty much throughout the day, you can even make iced tea with it. You always have it in your body. But if you want something so direct and so quick, the tincture is the best way to go.
Okay. I think it's fascinating. I love just talking about stuff like this. And I'm definitely a plant lover in every way. I eat a lot of plants, 95% plants.
Right.
And I think about even my food as medicine, right? When I construct my beautiful salads, I'm not just throwing cucumbers and lettuce on there. I'm thinking about all of the different compounds that are in different plants and getting that into my body. So if I'm thinking about taking a supplement or a tincture, I feel like this may really jive with a lot of people because we want to get the biggest bang for the buck, right?
Right. And it also just assimilates much quicker, and it's more efficient in how it works than the capsule or the pill or the tea.
Yes. And I know that we can ingest herbs, and you mentioned topically, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Vicki, is there a difference? Like if somebody just decided to just put it in their mouth or put it on their body, are there things people should be aware of prior to ingesting or putting topically?
Yes. And it depends on what you're taking. So let me back up again to jewel weed, because that is a good assimilation there. So I make that salve for topical stuff. That works instantaneously. And then if I had that poison ivy again so bad, like I did the one time that I mentioned, as soon as you take that, it's getting into the tissue, and it's starting to do what it does. So when I had my lungs, I wish I would have had that tincture so bad, because it would have really relieved that quickly. Because if you've not ever had poison ivy in your lungs, it's painful. It's very painful.
I cannot imagine. It sounds dreadful. I don't want it on my skin, let alone in my lungs.
So anyways, so the tincture or the extract versus the topical, it's kind of the same thing. It's just one you just smear on you, and the other one you put in your mouth. And so you can, like people who are allergic to different plants out in the wild, so to speak, like ragweed and all that. There's a lot of different herbs that are in that family. And so if you're allergic to some of those, the ragweed and all that, you have to be careful about taking something like chamomile or feverfew. And so, it gets very technical, but it's so simple at the same time.
Well, I will say it's simple for an herbalist. This is
And
why
so,
everybody needs an herbalist on call and
yeah.
a practitioner to help guide the way, right? I'm a fan of knowledge, looking things up. You said you research, and you said there's no way you could know everything. And the same, right? Sometimes I learn something new every day. And oftentimes it's from one of my clients will mention something and they're like, have you heard of this? I'm like, no, but I know what I'm doing when we get off of our call. And then I'm deep in the research because I want to know, right?
I do too.
You said that it's great for poison ivy. What about other types of skin issues? Could it work, let's say, on eczema or psoriasis?
Yes, it can. And it can do like poison oak, chiggers. And I even had
I've had chiggers. It's terrible.
and I had one of my clients, my massage clients, she's she's got two girls. And a few years ago, they went up to Michigan camping. And I guess they were sitting on the dock fishing. And both of these little girls got chiggers all over their legs and other areas. And so she called me and she says, "Oh my gosh, Vicki, what do I do? They're miserable." I said, "Do you have that jewel weed salve with you?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Put it all over them." So then when they got back, she called me and she says, "Oh boy, did that relieve that." So it is good for many things, but it's just more, I guess, predominant for poison ivy and poison oak and that kind of stuff. Also, I had a gal who I just gave her a jar, and she was in a bad spot financially. So I helped her out and I gave her a jar of that. And she called me one day and she said, "Oh my God, I have the worst hemorrhoids because when I was having my kids, I pushed so hard." She goes, "And when those hemorrhoids flare up," she goes, "it is unbelievable, the pain and the itch." She said, "Could I use that salve?" I said, "It's not going to hurt you." And so I said, "Just use a Q-tip. Do not put the end of the Q-tip you touch with your skin back in the jar, because you can basically get bacteria and all kinds of stuff in your jar." So she used it, and then she called me back. I'm not kidding you, 3 minutes later, and she said, "My God, the relief." She goes, "Thank you so much." So that's how I found out about that it's good for hemorrhoids. And there's so many things that different salves, herbs, or tinctures can be used for. The broad band, so to say, of the uses of these herbs are unbelievable, of all these plants. And so I did want to mention, if I don't grow my plants and I don't wildcraft them, and by the way, wildcrafting is just simply going out in the wild and gathering plants, for people who've never heard of that. There's a couple of companies that I will order organic herbs from. One of them is Mountain Rose Herbs, and the other one is Horizon Herbs. And they're both pretty much family-owned businesses. That's their specialty, is just growing organic herbs. Oh, I'm sorry. Horizon Herbs switched. The mom and dad retired and the kids took it over. So now it's called Strictly Medicinals.
Gotcha.
And
I will link all of that in the show notes if anybody wants to check out that information. Interestingly, I have tried my hand at herbalism. I don't know if I'm doing it right. I will venture to say I am not, because I haven't had any training with herbs, but with capsaicin, I've actually prescribed that for the pharmaceutical drug that you can buy for with psoriasis, and it's life-changing, right? And so I thought, I've got chili peppers and dried chili peppers, and I mixed it with coconut oil, and I don't feel any heat. And it's like almost bright red, and it's soothing. It's probably the coconut oil that's soothing, because I have some psoriasis on my feet. Just it flares up sometimes depending on my stress levels and sleep usually, and what I'm eating. But I'm probably going to have you whip up a salve for me with the capsaicin, because it isn't just about taking an herb and just combining it with a vessel. Like you're drawing it out of the plant.
Right. Oh gosh, Tara, you should come on over and take my herb class.
Note to self, I think I need to do that, because like I said, what I've made is, I wouldn't call it a salve, because it isn't. It's literally ground up chili peppers, and organic coconut oil. But it's helpful, but I'm not getting the benefit from it that I know I could be getting, because literally I don't know what I'm doing.
That's all right. That's what I'm here for. What else was I going to say? Something that you said. It'll come back to me.
How do you, speaking of you mentioned dosing earlier. How do you dose tinctures? Because it's not like take 2 capsules and call me in the morning.
Right. So what can happen, I should say, trying to think of a really good example. Okay, so say, I have a little kid that's like 6 or 7 years old, and they get a very bad ripe cold. And so I created a cough, cold, and flu remedy that I sell a lot of. And so what I would do as far as dosing with this kid, children take half of the dosage that an adult would. So what I would do is I would every hour, every waking hour, I would take a dosage, one dropper. And when you fill up a dropper with these little things, it only fills almost halfway up. And that's considered a dropper full or a squeeze of the bulb. And for kids, you can put it in their juice or water or whatever. But if you don't want your child to have alcohol in their system, there's another way to give those dosages to kids or an adult. So what you do is you just boil some water and you make a tea or just hot water. You put your dropper full in there and you let it sit for 3 or 4 minutes. The alcohol evaporates and then you drink the liquid, and it is then suspended into that hot liquid. And you can let it cool. You don't want to give a kid a hot thing. So I would give it for a solid day every hour on the hour. And then they'll start to get better. And then you back off. And then I back it off to 2 or 3 hour in between. And then once they're getting better a few days later, their symptoms won't be as harsh as well. So then depending on what else they have going on, like say they have more mucus than they have something else, another symptom, then you can just take and do one single herb like marshmallow root, gets rid of that mucus and the inflammation that they would have. So basically a dosage for an adult is about 2 of the droppers each time, 2 or 3 times a day, just like a prescription. And for a child, it's just cut in half. And when I mean child, I mean 12 years and younger. And it also depends, like if you have 11 or 12-year-old and they're just as body size as an adult, then you can give them an adult dosage. But for younger kids, it's just half of whatever it would be for an adult.
Yes. And I know from personal experience that when you make a tincture for somebody or sell a tincture to somebody at the farmer's market or through your store, that you're giving them instructions. Because I know how many times I'm asking you about things that others are likely asking you, and it's personalized, right? Because it may have to do with the way in which somebody's body is able to process things at the moment, right?
It is, yes. And also it depends on, their lifestyle in general. If they're eating pizzas and cheeseburgers and things like that, these herbs will have a little bit of a struggle getting there to do what they do. I mean, they're not going to certainly back away. That's not what I'm saying. I mean, they won't work as effectively. And so when I say to people, give me an idea, like, what did you eat for lunch or breakfast or whatever? And, they had breakfast at McDonald's drive-through. And then for lunch, they went. Yeah. And so, you get all these other health issues going on. And so I think probably the one thing that I suggest that people kind of get rid of if they're feeling not so great is to get rid of dairy, because that can cause mucus in your body. And there's also sugar in dairy. And the other worst thing, I think, is pasta, because it converts to sugar in our body too, the white flour.
Yes.
So,
yes.
And so it's those kinds of things. And when I do a consult with someone, it's a solid hour. And there's over 100 questions that I ask. And, that gives me like the first set of questions that starts just asking about their general lifestyle. And, then we talk about how we can eliminate one thing at a time and put something in there that's a better choice. And then like the third part of the consult is, how to actually use a tincture to get the most benefit from it. And, it's interesting to watch people's faces, because they had no idea that things could be so in depth. And so that's the reason I started taking this other class I'm taking, because now I want to do a consult with somebody, and then they can come back in 2 weeks for a 15-minute follow-up. So it's totally going to be set up to where like a doctor functions.
Mm-hmm.
You come for your initial visit, and then you come back for your little checkup. And I'm going to incorporate, when they come back for their 15 or 30-minute follow-up, I'm also going to do some adjustments physically on their body to help them. Like if they're having stomach issues, I can do a little bit of a, massage around their intestines. And that really can steer some things up. So this type of healthcare is becoming more and more prevalent in our society. But you get a lot of naysayers, and then you get people who swear by it, and then you get everybody in between. So along with learning about a person, I don't prescribe anything. I just make suggestions because I'm not a medical doctor. And so my prescription pad is those pretty colored Post-it notes. So people will say, "Can you write that down?" And I said, stick this on your refrigerator so you have it. But on the bottles, there are certain legalities that are required of someone who makes tinctures and sells them to the general population. You have to have the batch number because it has to be able to be traced of where that plant came from. If somebody says, "Oh, I got sick," you have to have the expiration date. You have to have the FDA disclosure on there. There's a lot of information to put on one of those little 2x3-inch labels. And then you put what it is. And then on the side, on one side, there's the ingredients that are in there. And on the other side is the suggested uses. And I can usually fit anywhere between 6 to 8 suggested uses on there. But I always suggest to people, do your own research too. This, yes, depending on what it is, it could be used for, 20 other things that you have.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm a big advocate of individuals doing their own research for whatever it is that they're interested in for their body, because we have to be involved. Not even involved isn't even a strong enough word. We're like the captain of our bodies. Right. And it needs to be us that's running the show and getting the information from the experts such as yourself for like, try it for this or maybe for this, but then, yeah, absolutely. And I also believe not everything works for everyone. Right. That I wish everything worked for everyone all of the time, but there's so many nuances. Like you said, what are they eating? And, how are they sleeping? Do
they get physical exercise?
Yes.
Do they participate themselves in some sort of quiet meditation?
Yes.
And the variables are,
do they have a leaky gut? Right. So I talk about leaky gut every day, every single day with clients, with my husband, with friends, with you, with everybody, anybody that'll listen. I'm talking about it, right?
Yeah, I get it.
if we have a leaky gut, we might be able to assimilate a tincture more easily than if it was a capsule. But what else is getting through there, right? If we're getting lipopolysaccharides through or just undigested protein, the body doesn't know what that is, and it's considered an invader to the body because it's not an amino acid, vitamin, or a water. We may not be able to utilize the supplement, the herb, the tincture, the medication, right? Because that goes for medications too. And so bringing it back to the basics, to the foundation of what makes health. I love that you start when you're working with someone by really diving into that individual to understand who they are. I think that is so important and oftentimes overlooked, definitely in conventional healthcare, because frankly, there's no time, right? Somebody will fill out a paper. It's very vague. And a lot of times I worked in conventional healthcare. A lot of times the paper was blank, right? So nothing's filled out. And we don't really know what somebody is going through, even what their thoughts are, I'm a big advocate of thinking about our mental state, because
Yeah.
if I'm having lots of stinking thinking,
Ah, that's so cute.
my mom used to say that, and I was on another podcast a week ago. It hasn't aired yet, with Dr. Eric Balkavage, and he used the word stinking thinking, and it made me laugh because it makes me think of
I love that.
because she
I've
always said
never
that.
heard that.
So when I have my episodes of stinking thinking, it's a lot less these days because I understand what these negative thoughts can do, and also I just don't have the same level of negative thoughts because I got rid of so much of the garbage I was
Yeah.
eating, and I'm practicing self-care, and I think about sleep, and but my thoughts, right? If I have a negative thought, or I'm under more stress and I'm getting this stinking thinking going, and then I'm taking a tincture or whatever, I may not be able to utilize it. And maybe I might not have the effect I'm after, not because it doesn't work, but because my body was not able to receive it.
Mhm.
That's
You know, there was something that you said. Uh, so I also will delve a little bit into, like in a consult with someone, their mental condition. Like, have they experienced severe trauma? Any car accidents? Um, it's just basically it's a huge investigative thing that I do. And people come just like they come to you to figure out why things are happening and what could be done about it. And just this morning on the news, there was a gentleman on there, and I'm going to look him up. And he was talking about how fast food in general will basically mess with your brain, not only your body, but your brain. And it can cause memory loss. You can't get a thought out. And what I'm talking about is past the usual, oh, hold on a minute, I forgot it. It'll come back. I'm talking about long-term things, long-term conditions of the thought processes that a human being could have. And like I said, the trauma sometimes can do an awful lot of damage physically too, not just mentally. And mostly my big answer for that kind of stuff is, man, you need to start working out. You need to find something you love to do and
joy.
just, yeah, sweat that stuff out. I mean, I go kayaking all the time. I'd like to go trail running. Um,
Same.
and I do yoga. I just do all kinds of stuff. Like when I go to the grocery store, I'll park way in the back 40. And most of the time I walk really quickly up to the store. Or this morning when I stopped at the store, I ran all the way to the door and only had a little bit of stuff. So I ran back to my truck. So I always find ways to basically steer things up in here.
Well, and
And
something like that is easy to do, right? I like you park very far away, and it might seem like, does it really matter? It does, because how
it
many
does.
times is somebody stopping? They're
You know,
driving.
all of the little things that we do. And when you get further into it, when you stop and think about it, when I was young, if we were watching TV, my goodness, you had to get off the couch and go turn the channel. You had to get up and turn the lights on and off. You, you were always moving, doing something. And granted, those are not big expenditures there. However, today's society is just, it's not a healthy society.
Being sedentary is the new smoking, right?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
so dangerous. I really want to get into, because I want to make sure we have enough time for it, some of your favorite herbs. We've mentioned
Oh,
a few, but we're dying to know, for my listeners and viewers, what are some of your favorite herbs, Vicki?
okay. So three that just pop right into the top of my head when you ask me that is, one of them is red clover. So there is, and again, I have a disclosure. I'm not a medical doctor, so I have a little freedom in what I can say. I don't make any claims. I just have to get that out there. So red clover is that plant that you see everywhere in the summer that has the little ball looking flowers on it. It's more purplish than it is red. And so there's plant-based estrogen in that little plant.
Yes.
And it also helps to relieve stress. It supports bone health. Like I have a gentleman that I'm working with now who has a bone disease, and he's taken several. And one of the things is red clover. And again, you can take red clover as a tincture or a tea. But if you drink tea, you got to drink tea a lot. It purifies the blood, and it just helps extricate the icky metabolic waste that we have in our body. And it's just like this magical thing. And
Yes.
it's great for lymphatic congestion. I mean, if you pretty much have clean blood and clean system, you're going to be feeling on top of the world. And here next month I'm going to be 66, and I will tell you, I feel better now than I did when I was 20.
You definitely do not look 66.
Thank you.
Not even close. I'll say red clover is one of my favorites also. I call it like a whimsical wonder. It's packed with these isoflavones, right? And it's natural plant. I'm going to use the word chemicals. They're not chemicals from pharmaceutical, but plants are powerful, right? And they are estrogen. So I liken it to like a superhero for easing menopausal symptoms like hot flashes, night sweats, perimenopause, menopause. I'm living the dream right now in perimenopause. And actually, I am living the dream right now because my symptoms are gone. And red clover is one of the things that I utilize. I'm glad you brought up about bones, because there's a lot of interesting research behind that also. I wonder, what are your thoughts on microgreens?
Oh, what's my thoughts? I could sleep in them. I eat microgreens. I eat a lot of microgreens.
See, now I'm going to have to create an image. I might have to use AI to put Vicky on a bed of microgreens.
To me. So
sounds awesome.
Three of my favorite microgreens are the pea shoots. They have that little bit of,
they grow so fast.
They grow so fast, and the nutrients. Yeah. So those little bitty plants have this much nutrients. And so a lot of times, like a fella at the farmer's market, he sells mushrooms and microgreens. And I'll go down there and get 2 containers of the microgreens. And by the time the market is over in 4 hours, the microgreens have been consumed by me. I eat them a lot. So my favorite ones are the broccoli ones. And then there's a mix that you can get. It's called Zesty something.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah. And then the other one is the pea shoots.
I love microgreens. Anybody that knows me or listens to me, all of my clients know I recommend most people try their hand at growing them. I do not, unfortunately, I have not been blessed necessarily with a green thumb. I try. You can't really see my plants up there, but they're somewhat suffering most of the time. But my microgreens just are like the blossom. They're phenomenal, and they're easy. And I would say definitely broccoli microgreens. Anybody that has any hormonal issues or really any issues at all, inflammatory issues, I think about headaches, I think about joint pain, anything like that. We need that sulforaphane, and it is broccoli sprouts. Forget about eating broccoli. I do that too, but broccoli sprouts is where it's at. So broccoli sprouts for me, radish, another cruciferous.
Oh, I love those.
I just recently started growing rainbow radish, which I love it. It's also pretty easy to grow, fast to grow. It's very spicy, right? My 8-year-old grandson loves radish microgreens, and I put them in my smoothie. I probably use 2, when I say handful, it's probably like a cup in one handful. And I use 2 large handfuls in my smoothie and 1 handful in my husband's. And I switched him because I'm growing different things, and I put radish in there, and he drank it. He's like, whoa, what did you put in there? I'm like, do you like it?
Putting a little fire in there. Yeah.
He's
And
like, I think I do like it, but whoa. I'm like, try drinking it with all the ginger that I have in mine also.
oh yeah. Yeah. And ginger in and of itself, whether it's a tincture or you just shred it and you eat it. I mean, like this morning, I get up and make a pot of soup. I've got like 4 inches of ginger in that soup that I grated. That's a lot of ginger.
And I saw that photo, and I'm going to insert it right here because I want to eat that soup so badly. It looks delicious. Vicky's an amazing, phenomenal cook. And you're actually working on a cookbook, aren't you?
I am. It's going to be called the Alchemy Botanicals Cookbook, Volume 1. And
as soon as it's out, remind me, and I'll link it below for anybody that comes back to this at some future point, or just bookmark this so that you can circle back. If you're not receiving my newsletter, be sure, everyone listening or watching, to click the link below to get on the newsletter list. And then when Vicky's book is out, I will be sure to spread the word, because I am definitely looking forward to it as a fellow recipe developer. I love that you focus on whole foods, and it's not only really good for the body, visually stunning, right? We eat with our eyes, and
yes,
and so I'm thinking about what the food can do for my health. So like, food is medicine, but I want to be jazzed up while I'm eating. I want to be looking at my plate and smiling, or my bowl, whatever it is, because so many people ask me, well, if you changed your diet, right? So when Vicky first met me, I had horrific migraines, horrific PMS, and the long list of problems that are too long to mention. And she did wonders for me with the injuries that I had. And I tried lots of different things and it helped, but I didn't change my garbage diet at the time. So sweet tarts.
But it's not because I didn't get onto your little butt about that.
Oh, you did. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't think it mattered. So I definitely am very empathetic for everybody that I know, friends, family, clients of mine, who find it a little bit troublesome, difficult. Like, do I really need to change what I'm doing? And I would say yes, right? We don't have to do everything necessarily all at once, because that could be a stressor. But until I dramatically changed and I went from the processed pasta every day, garbage bread, candy, just eating candy like it was going out of style. I'm surprised I still have teeth. That was what I ate. I'm like, what's a vegetable? And you know what? I will be transparent about that and say it, because my life I was suffering for so long with all of these problems, including pretty significant ADHD. They used to say I had ants in my pants. And now I probably still oftentimes feel like I have ants in my pants, because I have so many things going through my mind, and there's so many things I want to do, but I'm able to like sit in my own skin differently since I really have adopted a whole foods diet, right? And I feel like anybody that's thinking about herbs.
And when you have a whole foods diet and you're making all these lifestyle changes, not a diet, not a temporary 3 to 6 month thing. No. We're talking about for the rest of your life. It also, like I said earlier, if you get a whole food diet going on and you start using herbs, they are going to be so much more effective than if you ate crappy food. And, this morning I had a big smile on my face. Remember earlier I mentioned that doctor on there? I think it was a doctor that was talking about the fast food stuff and how it can mess with us really bad. I was just so excited to hear that on mainstream news. And I was like, what's this? And, there's a book, I'm going to order it. I found it somewhere along my way here. It's called Metabolica. I don't know the author, but that entire book is about the harmful effects of fast food and the detrimental effects of fast food on a brain and a body. So
I will find that book and I will link it in the show notes.
Okay.
I also want to check that out. I feel like just as a community, we hear something, we read something, we know something, like we should spread the word, right? Because it can be life-changing.
This, I just thought of the guy's name. It's Dr. Daryl. I don't know how to pronounce the last name. It's Gioffe, I think.
Geoff?
Something like
We'll
that.
go with that. I'm okay to mispronounce it. I do it.
Anyways, he was the fellow that was putting that out there, and I was pretty excited. I thought, well, today's going to be the greatest day ever now. There was something else I wanted to mention. Oh, just so people can get an idea of the use of herbs and natural plant medicine in a whole foods diet, and some form of movement every day. I have recovered myself from a heart issue, and I literally fixed that with food. And at first I thought, oh dear God in heaven, that broccoli tastes so nasty. That was years and years ago.
I love that you say that, though, because our taste buds do change.
They change.
And then it's delicious. And then the broccoli.
It is. I eat broccoli at least twice a day, every single day. So then I get through all of that, get back on track. And then in 2008, I had an unfortunate experience. Some crazy guy threw me against the wall. I ended up having a stroke. For a few months, I couldn't walk. I couldn't feed myself. I couldn't think straight. And so I remember sitting in this chair, and my friend Angela came over to check on me. And, there's nothing worse than having to go pee like a racehorse and you can't get up and walk. And so she would help me. And slowly, as I could communicate, because my words were all jumbled, I would tell her what to get me. And so she would sit there, and I would take one finger on the keyboard of my computer and just type a word. And it was all vegetables, organic vegetables. And then I said to her, I want some spirulina tablets. And so she got those. And so I started getting better, and I had lost my entire business. I lost everything I had. And so things were healing. And then, then I could get up and go to the bathroom by myself over time. And then my right side was affected. And for the first time since then, 4 months ago, I walked down a set of steps without holding the rails like 100-year-old lady. And I was having to put one foot down and then put the other one down, put one foot down, put the other one down. And now I can just boom, 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 go like I used to. And so even all these years later, food and exercise and all of those things that we have been talking about sure make a difference. And then the first time that I could use a fork again, I sat there and cried. And I thought, God, Vicki, you're getting better with food. And so I just kept going. And then I would Angela would help me make these smoothies. And then one day I thought, oh, I'm doing a lot better. I'm going to try this smoothie making thing by myself. So I plugged my Vitamix in. And guess what? I forgot to put the cover on.
That's unfortunate.
So I'm crying, and I called her. I said, Angela, my kitchen looks like somebody put green paint everywhere. And so she came and helped me get it all cleaned up. But so now here it is, 2024. And I will tell you, I do things probably a lot better than I did before that happened, because I really learned, and I don't believe there's anybody on this earth that will ever tell me that food is not medicine.
I agree.
And so from that, I developed one of my supplements in my product line, and it has spirulina, chlorella, seaweed, kelp, and it has ginger and turmeric in it. So it's all this cell-growing food and all this stuff for inflammation at the same time.
Very powerful.
And I take that and put it in a little shot glass of some liquid every morning and just drink it. And years ago, I started filling capsules with stuff, and I thought, oh, this takes too long, and I don't like those capsules. So it's just a powder form. And also, I wanted to mention real quick, I recently started growing my own mushrooms for tinctures, and I'm planning on making mushroom coffee. So
I love that. I am a huge fan of mushrooms. And it's interesting, like you said, broccoli was like, ugh, when you first had it, I definitely felt the same way. But mushrooms, for me, it was a texture thing. And
yeah.
I never have believed I would ever love mushrooms and actually crave mushrooms. They're so good for us, right?
Right. And for many things, and I have you ever had inaki mushrooms?
I don't know.
They're long and skinny, and they got a little cap on the top. Well, anyways.
Oh, yeah.
You can use those in place of pasta. Like you can make a stir fry and have vegetables or whatever you want with it, and it takes the place of the noodles.
Yeah, I love mushrooms, and for somebody that doesn't love them, or if we just have a plant or something that we're like, I don't know, I don't really like it, I would challenge somebody to try it, like microdosing with it a little bit, and see if we can develop like a liking to it. But if somebody definitely has a strong aversion to something, I do think that something like a mushroom coffee, a tincture with things in it, if somebody's like, turmeric is too strong, I use turmeric every day, turmeric and ginger and pretty much everything that you're that you use, I'm a huge fan of. But I've grown to like the bitterness, the pungentness of certain things in the food form, right? But there's other ways to get it in.
There is, and I will tell you, fresh ginger and fresh garlic are magic potions to put on food that you don't like the taste of.
Yes. And I love that you mentioned garlic, because garlic, there's a lot of interesting research behind garlic and
it's a blood
pressure, right? Blood pressure and coronary calcifications. I'm kind of deep in research right now with that, because I want to do a whole show on aged garlic, particularly. It's fascinating. Again, plants have medicinal properties, right? And one could argue they are medicine, and that secondly, they're good, like they taste good, like it can help us with ailments.
Oh yeah,
it's physical, and on the outside or
overall, across the spectrum of mushrooms, they are all good for immunity and for different types of cancer.
Yes.
And in European countries, they use chaga mushroom in their hospitals for their cancer patients. And I thought, the United States is so far behind the game, it seems.
Yeah, we are. And I'll tell you this, he'll find out now, because I'm going to put myself on blast. My husband has mushrooms every day. He just doesn't know it.
I love it.
I use a different blend of the powdered that I kind of feel like it almost can taste like chocolate.
And you know something? I used to make, and now that I just thought of this, I'm probably going to make it tonight for dinner. I used to make this lentil loaf. It's like a meatloaf, but there's no meat in it. And I would dice up different mushrooms and put them in there to give it, like you say, a more pungent flavor, and put herbs in there. And then you just put it in a pan like you would a meatloaf. And then you just slice it. And you could make gravy to go with that.
That sounds amazing. And I'll tell you this, my husband, for as much as he doesn't eat mushrooms, he used to be a professional chef, which is funny, because then now he's in construction, and he's also a nutrition counselor, which is like, talk about a wide variety of things he does. But he makes the absolute best stuffed mushrooms. I'll put a picture up right here. I will also link to a recipe video below where you can grab the recipe, because
I'm just coming over.
It started out as my grandmother's recipe, but I I used to change things around when
Oh
she was
yeah.
cooking because she raised me. She would be like, Tara, go stir the sauce. And so she'd go in the other room. I would open up the spice cabinet. I'm not even kidding. I was like 6, 7 years old doing this. And I would make sure she's not looking. And I would sniff the different
Oh
spices,
yeah.
sniff
Yeah.
the pause. And I would just throw all kinds of stuff in there. And when
Oh
she
yeah.
would eat it, I mean, it hypes me up thinking about it. It just makes me smile. She would say, my God, Dominic, this is the best. This is the best sauce I've ever made. And
That is hilarious.
I would be so, I'd sit there just grinning ear to ear. And it wasn't until years later that I told her that I was always adding things to it. And I feel like that's what started my love of cooking was
Yeah.
the encouragement of getting in the kitchen, but just thinking about the different aromas and smelling them. Like my husband says, I cook with my nose. Well, other people cook by taste. I do that
Yeah.
too. But I just stand there and I just
Oh yeah.
get the smell
It's like
and I
get
get
the vapors.
inspired.
Get the vapors.
I get
Oh,
inspired.
one more thing I wanted to mention about red clover.
Yes, because then I want to get to the second favorite.
It's also been known, besides balancing your hormones, is to help with fertility issues. Uh-huh.
That's very
And
interesting.
it's very, very interesting. So my next one is yarrow. And I talked about that a little bit before. So yarrow, um, does a bunch of good things for us. And I will never forget how to go out and identify yarrow out in a field. You know what a little centipede looks like with 1,000 legs on it?
Yes.
Yarrow, or Achillea millefolium, is the leaves on it have a whole bunch of little tiny things, and it reminds you of a little lizard thing.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it also it's good for fever and inflammation. It can actually assist a body in internal bleeding somewhat. And it reduces hot flashes. Let me think. Oh, it's really good for urinary tract infections.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and and it heals wounds very, very quickly. And um, I'm going to be I have other salves, but I don't have the labels created for them. Like I have comfrey and plantain, and I am going to have just a solid yarrow tincture or salve. And because, if you have kids and they're out and they fall and scrape their leg or something, just wash it off and put that on there, put a Band-Aid on it, and boom, by the end of the day, it's going to be pretty good. So yarrow is just another one of those magic things that's on the earth. Really good for bladder infections. So I tell these women that come here that, if they have urinary tract infection or bladder infections, you're going to take this, and then we're going to drink 1 quart of 100% cranberry juice. And they're like, oh God, I can't do that. I said, you're going to get well. And well, why can't I just go get an antibiotic? I said, well, you can get on out of here then. No, I don't say that. I always tell people that it's your choice. These are just suggestions from me.
And interestingly, because I am a fan of, again, root cause medicine, trying to figure out why.
Yeah.
And it used to be standard practice to just put people on prophylactic antibiotics for urinary tract infections. And I come from the women's health world, and so many individuals, and then they have all of these other issues, right?
Yeah.
And they end up with vaginal issues, right? And
Right.
dysbiosis inside the vagina, dysbiosis inside the body. And we have microbiome all
That's
over
what I was going to say.
us,
Yeah.
right? We don't really have sterile areas in our body like we used to believe. It's normal for us to have these microbes, right? Another herb or plant that I have actually used myself, and again, this is not an endorsement. If you have a urinary tract infection, go get a culture, make sure it's what you have. You likely need antibiotics. I'm not against antibiotics. Antibiotics can save lives, but I
Yes.
oregano and had great success. for a variety of different things, including rashes, a urinary tract infection, different, like even the psoriasis. But I'm not talking about just shaking oregano on food, but more high potency oregano.
Right.
But it's strong, right? So I wouldn't recommend, I'll rephrase it. Boy, when I talk, I wave my arms and I'm knocking things on my desk. If you hear crashing, it's because I talk with my hands. And I'm not advocating for somebody to just go start taking random herbs, plants,
Right.
supplements. You really should be working with someone on this.
Right.
Really important. But oregano is something I do cycle in and out if I feel like I need it. I think it's something every individual should have in their arsenal just in case something's going on. I had somebody who had really bad COVID, and aside from making sure she had adequate vitamin D, vitamin C, and zinc, I put her on oregano, and it did wonders for her. Again, this is not an endorsement to go take oregano. I just find it so fascinating. And the more we learn about these herbs, and again, if we're working with an herbalist such as yourself, a practitioner like me, somebody that is schooled in this and can work with you, I can't state enough how important that is. I want to be mindful of your time, Vicki, because I know we're coming up here on time. What is the third herb? Everybody wants to know.
It is marshmallow root.
Ah.
And marshmallow root is a demulcent. And it's good for a lot of things. It's a diuretic. It relieves skin and tissue irritation. Absolutely wonderful for wound healing. Actually, it also comes from the hollyhock family. The flower on that plant really looks like a mini hollyhock. I mean, you could mistake it for that. It's good for your heart because of that. What's the word I want? Like marshmallow root tincture can be a little bit thick, and it's very soothing to the veins, nerves, arteries. It's almost like oatmeal. Very soothing to those things.
How about headaches?
For marshmallow root, that I don't know. I'll just be honest with you. I don't know if it's good for, but I would imagine if you're getting rid of all that stuff in your head, that it would take that pressure off.
Yeah, I've used marshmallow root before. I think I don't think I know. I got it from you. It was a long time ago, probably 2014 or 2015. And I'm trying to think of why I would have been using it, because I never really had a lot of this issues. I feel like it was like pulsating, but maybe we were thinking. I vaguely remember laying there.
I bet you that's what it was.
We're doing something, and you're like, "Do you feel that?" I'm like, "I feel something. I don't know what it is."
I feel something.
It's more of a surprise. I think you were even pushing on me here, or you were doing something, because I said I feel lightheaded, and you did. She's got magic hands, friends. She did something, and she's like, "Do you feel that?" And I'm like, "My ears just popped."
Yeah. And so all of these different plants that we have been talking about, there's like thousands of them. This is just a little tiny dot on the map. And so the more people like you and I, and people who, come to take classes or whatever, they might just be starting out with something, but boy, oh boy, they have no idea the power of plants and herbs and food. And so I really like teaching about that. And, the herb class that I teach is 4 days long. And so I take a person from raw material all the way to having a label on your bottle. I mean, you might just make it for yourself and your family, or you never know, it might turn into a product line to put out in the world.
I actually think I do need to take that class, because
you should. It's fun.
I'm interested enough in it, but I also don't just go into Google and how do you make capsaicin cream? I did that and it doesn't work. So there's a reason why somebody would take classes. I'm a forever learner.
Yeah.
I definitely want to take that class. Anyone interested that lives in the Southern Indiana region or is willing to travel, do you offer this class often, or how can somebody take the class? Will you give me a link I'll put, or
Yeah, well, I usually teach it every spring, late spring, early summer, because we usually will go out into the woods and out in the fields in part of the class. And
we're going on a field trip.
We're going on it, honey. And you got to bring
do I have to wear one of those suits?
bring your big hat and bring some boots that you can get muddy and wet, because sometimes that's what happens. I had years ago, I taught this class and this girl shows up with high heels. I kid you not, high heels. And I'm looking at her and I said, you're gonna have to take those off because your heels are gonna get stuck in the dirt. And by the time that class was over that day, the first day of the class, she was like, I see what you mean.
That's really funny. I don't wear high heels, but I wear like boots with heels. They're not pointy. Yeah. But yeah, when I live in the country now. I'm from New York, from Brooklyn, concrete world, right?
Yeah, I'm from Chi-Town.
Huh? When I first met my husband and came out here to basically the middle of nowhere. We're on 5 acres. It may not be a lot to some people, but where I'm from, it's a lot.
It's a lot.
I'm wearing my fancy, Spanish boots in the yard. He's like, you're not going to want to wear those. I'm like, I'm fine. And I basically ruined those boots. And now I have like boots to be able to go in any condition. So I will make sure I wear those for the class.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story real quick. One of my favorite stores on the planet is Rural King, the farm store. And so I wanted a pair of these boots in particular. And now I can't even think of the name of them. They're like $180 a pair. And I thought, I want a pair of those boots. I got to have a pair of those boots. And I go in there one day and he took the display model off, put them on the clearance rack for $32. I got my boots. And I am going to have those boots for a long, long time. So it matters. Like, I look at those boots and my different hats that I have, because I did have a little bit of skin cancer a while back. So I wear a big brimmed hat when I'm out in the sun, and also for ticks when you're out, because sometimes we end up going out in the woods to get some sort of roots or something, and you don't want to get ticks on your hair.
You do not. As somebody who's had Lyme disease so many times, and chronic Lyme, and that was one of the triggers for the development of my autoimmune conditions, I am a fan of protecting ourselves from like covering up, and then also shedding our clothing as soon as you get in and taking a shower, have somebody check you. That's very important. So I guess I'm going to have to get one of those suits. Whatever you've got, send me a link, because I want to. We can get out there.
And I bought myself also at a yard sale. I bought what are they called? Coveralls, the insulated kind.
Yes.
Because I don't stop doing this stuff because it gets cold outside. I have all of I look at that as my equipment, just like I do, all of my things that I fill my bottles with, or yes. I cook. I special ordered stainless steel double boilers years ago. And I used to go to Kleindorfer's, a local little hardware store here. And this guy, Andy, who no longer works there, used to order. He goes, "What are you doing with all this stuff?" I said, "It's all about the magic. It's all about the magic."
I love that. And I've absolutely loved this conversation. How can my listeners, viewers find you? What's the best way for somebody to get in touch with you if they have questions, if they're interested in buying from you or taking your class or your cookbook?
Oh my goodness. They can go to my website. And so I switched over. I think I mentioned that earlier, so I'm not done with it. It is alchemyllc.net. And alchemy is ALCHEMIE.net. They can give me a call at 812-361-7705. A text is the most fabulous way for me. You can send me an email through my website. Yeah, and I like meeting people. I have a lady right now that I just got her check in the mail. She's coming from Michigan to take that herb class.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. And I am going to sign up for that because I'm very interested, and I love the concept of going out and like, would it be called foraging, or that's different?
It can be the same. Like right
If I
now,
eat it, it's foraging, right? Is that
is
foraging?
what?
If you eat it, it's foraging.
Yeah,
Is that right?
yeah. And right now, when my granddaughter comes over on Thursdays, we go hiking in the woods, and we found 3 mullein plants, and so she has named them the daddy, the mommy, and the baby. And then there's a bigger one growing by the back deck that's bigger than those, and she says that's the grandma one. And so it's just fun to be out there with the kids or just by myself and getting these plants. Or so now I've got to wait for that mullein plant to grow about 6 foot tall. And she was like, she squats down and she's feeling the leaves, and she's like, "Oh, grandma," she said, "that's so soft." And it's fun to teach the kids stuff. And I get them involved. I get my grandkids involved with some of the stuff that I'm doing. Obviously not the what I call the brewing part, but they'll help put some labels on. They always say, make sure you put the tape with the name of that herb, grandma. So, it's this thing that started happening to me when I was just a little kid at my grandma's farm all the way till now. And I'm just totally and completely bowled over with how much information that I have soaked into my thick skull over all the years. And like you said, I'm just a lifelong learner. I'm not happy learning one new thing in a day. It's got to be like 6 or 8.
Yes, yes. And the next thing I'm going to learn are herbs. Are herbs.
Cool.
I'm going to learn about the cultivation of herbs and the creation of salves and tinctures and things.
Yeah, and you'll just have your own line of products. That would be
for that, friends.
that would be a good thing for you in your practice. Anyways,
Vicki, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on here today. I'm sure the viewers, listeners have loved this conversation, and we'll have to bring you back on the show at some point. I have a feeling we're going to get a lot of questions about, okay, those are her top 3, but what else does Vicki love?
Oh yeah, and another topic that is really deep in my heart is energy medicine.
Yes, and we didn't even touch on that today, so I will make a note of that. And if you're interested in that as a topic, let me know in the comments or send me a DM on Instagram. All of the links are in the show notes. Thank you so much, Vicki, for coming on here today.
Thank you so much. This was just so delightful, I have to tell you. So thank you. And thanks to all the listeners.
If you like this video, you're going to want to check this one out. I put it up right here. See you over there.